I pray that I might speak to you today in the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Most of what I'm going to share with you today, it comes from a sermon that my friend Bill Cliff, the Bishop of Brandon, Manitoba, it's a sermon that he preached several years ago. But in light of the fact that we find ourselves in the midst of a global pandemic, and because this has brought each and every one of us face to face with our own mortality, I think that as hard as it might be to do this, I think that this is a really important thing for us, each one of us, to spend some time reflecting on and thinking about. And because today is Good Friday, it offers that opportunity to be intentional about this. So here's the question that Bill invited us to think about. He said, I'm going to ask a difficult question today. How will you die? Now, I don't mean the particular circumstances of your death, but rather, how will you die? That is to say, in what way or in what spirit will you approach your death? There are lots of ways to die. There's even a reality show on TV on one of the trashier channels. I'm not sure if it's still on, but it was called 1,000 Ways to Die. And this show, it told story after story of, I don't even know how to describe it, about the increasing stupidity of things that people have done that have landed them in fatal situations. But that's not what I'm talking about. When I ask how you will die, I want you to think about how it is you will approach God on that day. The famous poet John Donne once said, "No man is an island unto himself." He talked about the fact that we are all leaves, individual leaves, and that one day God will translate us from one language into a greater language. That was his way of saying that we will all die someday. He then goes on to say that some are translated by disease, some by age, some by the sword, some by the state, but all together we will be translated and gathered up, all our separate leaves, into and bound in one book, where we will all lie open one to another. There is enough going on in the world because of the COVID-19 pandemic. There's so much going on in the world right now. The constant updating of the number of people who are sick and the number of people who have died from this disease. There's the reports of the overcrowded ICUs and the lack of ventilators and protective equipment for healthcare workers. We keep hearing horrible stories coming from Bobcaygeon or from Italy or from New York or from Detroit or from Quebec. There is more than enough going on in the world right now for you to consider how others die. When I ask how you will die, I am asking whether or not you have considered in what way you will turn your face to eternity. Will you have time to make your peace with God? Will you find yourself sitting in a doctor's office being given a death sentence and find yourself worrying about the next 6 months, 9 months, 12 months? Or will you enjoy the slow going out of the light that comes with age? Will the COVID virus or cancer or a heart attack, or will it be in your sleep after a long life? I don't know. None of us knows the day or the hour. In this moment, we live. But today of all days, we are given a demonstration. Today of all days, we are given an example that tells us one way to die. I want you to think for a moment about ancient Israel and Jerusalem. I want you to think about how the temple was built on a hill and dominated the skyline. You could see it for miles. Its pinnacles were high and it was gilded. It was absolutely beautiful. Israel had poured all of its heart and soul into the decoration of the place, which was the center of their faith. It was the throne of God in heaven itself brought to earth and present in their midst. So with that picture in your mind, think about this. It's quite likely that from the cross, which was on Golgotha, another hill in Jerusalem, it's quite likely that Jesus could see the temple, that as he hung on the cross, the temple would have been a major part of his view. If you want to ask the question about how you are going to die, or how you are going to approach your death faithfully, then let us spend some time reflecting on how Jesus died. We know that he called out from the cross. We know that he said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And we usually assume that the reason Jesus said these words was because in that moment, he felt utterly forsaken by God. But that's not what's going on in that moment. Let me remind you that Jesus was a faithful Jew. And as a faithful Jew, he knew his prayers. And as he hung on the cross, that is what he was doing. He was reciting Psalm 22. Psalm 22 from the ancient hymn book of Israel. He was singing this hymn as he died. As he hung on the cross and seeing the temple, he said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That's the only line we get to hear. That's the only line that is recorded. But this is the rest of the prayer. This is how Jesus died, saying this, singing this. He said, "Why are you so far from me, from helping me from the words of my groaning? O God, I cry in the daytime, but you do not answer. By night as well, but I find no rest." And then looking up, I imagine that Jesus could see the temple as he said this. "Yet you are holy, enthroned upon the praises of Israel. In you our ancestors trusted. They trusted you, and you delivered them. To you they cried and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame." And then he hung his head again. "But I am a worm and no man, scorned by others and despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They make mouths at me. They shake their heads. Commit your cause to the Lord. Let him deliver. Let him rescue the one in whom he delights." And again, at this moment, I think of Jesus raising his head and looking once again at the temple and saying, "Yet it was you who took me from the womb. You kept me safe on my mother's breast. On you I was cast from my birth, and since my mother bore me, you have been my God. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help." How you die is deeply and intimately connected to how you live. And in the moment when Jesus was hanging on the cross, looking across the valley at the temple above him on the hill, even while he felt forsaken, he still testified to the glory of God. "You enthroned on the praises of Israel, in you I have trusted, and you will deliver me." In the minds of those standing around that day, deliverance would have been a few angels, a trumpet blast, a sudden magical burst of light, and a quick hop down from the cross. That'll show them. Then they'd know that would be vindication. That would be a good Hollywood ending. But instead, in this story, what we get is more blood and more gore. And Jesus saying, "Be not far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help." How you die is deeply and intimately connected with how you live. And in Jesus, even on the cross, the centurion, remember the centurion. He hears Jesus saying his prayers from the cross. He hears Jesus strung up on the cross by the same religious authorities who were supposed to be his people, staring across at a temple that has been nothing but trouble for him. And he hears him say to God, "You are enthroned on the praises of Israel. In you our ancestors trusted, and you delivered them. To you they cried out and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame." The centurion hears Jesus proclaiming this hope that he has in God. And Jesus gives up his life and dies. In that moment, in the way that Jesus died, the centurion by tradition is converted, and he says, "Surely this man was God's son." He who can die, forgiving those who have done such wrong to him. He who has deserved none of this, earned none of the spitting or the shame or the mocking or the beating. He who can die forgiving those who have done all that to him. So I ask you, how will you die? Because when I ask that question, I am really asking you, how are you going to live from now on? Jesus was willing to trust God to deliver him out of the depths of death itself, knowing and trusting that in commending his spirit to God, or as the old prayer book says, giving up the ghost, he was trusting that God was not finished yet. Jesus knew that he was finished, and that he had taken the entire weight of humanity on his shoulders as he died and said, "It is finished." But God is not finished yet. And Jesus trusted in that moment that he could die with the words of the psalm on his lips. "You are enthroned on the praises of Israel." So how will you live? How will you live? Will you live even in the midst of all the fear and the uncertainty of this pandemic? Will you live trusting that God has for you in Jesus all that you need? Will you live understanding that what Jesus has done for you is enough, and that all you need to do is live into what has already been accomplished? Will you live knowing that even death itself comes to you, that your God is not finished the story yet? Will you live every moment from this moment on not knowing if death comes early or late, quickly or slowly? Will you live completely and fully into the life that you have been given to live? So that should you have time at the last, before you turn your face to eternity, be able to say something like Jesus did, "You have been my God, and you have always delivered me. You are enthroned on the praises of Israel, and in you I trust." How will you live? How will you die? Amen.